Hey guys, welcome back to today's video. Today is Tuesday, October 25th, 2022, and today we are going to be talking about the New Hampshire Senate race and the Republican Party that is now vying for the Senate seat, yet again putting their efforts back into what was a previously competitive Senate race, which seems to be getting even more competitive at this point in time, though the Republicans, prior to this decision, actually withdrew a significant amount of funds from Don Bolduc, the Republican nominee for Senate in the state of New Hampshire. Now, the national wave for the GOP has been becoming a lot more clear and apparent over the past couple of weeks. The Republican Party is in a much better position now than they were a month ago, 2 months ago, 3 months ago, and it looks like that momentum might maintain itself into the November midterm election. Now, for a long period of time, New Hampshire was really immune when it came down to this idea of a red wave. Even when Republicans were up on the national generic ballot, Maggie Hassan, the incumbent Democratic senator, had always led her opponent, Don Bolduc, in poll after poll after poll. And the thing is that even now, she still currently leads by 5.5% on average, but it's a narrowing up amongst more recent polls that have given the Republican Party a new revitalized expectation or hope or chance at victory in the state of New Hampshire. We can see in polls down here from Emerson College, Insider Advantage, Fabrizio Lee and Associates, all show Maggie Hassan within the margin of victory according to these polls. In addition to that, it's never a good sign to see a very close tightening before the race, but what you can find here is that Trafalgar shows Maggie Hassan ahead by 3. Emerson College says that she leads by 4. Insider Advantage says she leads by 1, and Fabrizio Lee and Associates says that she leads by 2. What's the main takeaway? What's the interesting thing about this? Well, this race was a race that prior to these new polls had Maggie Hassan up by about 8 points statewide, at different points in time, 9 points statewide, and it was a very good look. So with that very good look for the GOP, in fact, on my own prediction, I had New Hampshire as a likely blue state for a while. The last time it was lean blue was August 7th, 2022. Then it became likely because at that point in time, it was in fact likely. It was very clear that Maggie Hassan was going to win re-election, and in many ways it still is, that she is going to win re-election. That is evident through a lot of the data that we see coming out of the state, even the ones that are encouraging Republicans to get back into the race. But amidst what they are expecting to be a red tsunami rather than a red puddle, they are now investing in races that they otherwise did not think were winnable and might have withdrawn funds from before. The national Republicans, that being Mitch McConnell mostly, and also Rick Scott when it comes down to the NRSC, it says here that the NRSC will be spending about $1 million on a new ad financed jointly between the committee and the Bolduc campaign. The spot will be airing later this week. Republicans actually withdrew ads just a week ago. They canceled their spending. They canceled $5.6 million in ad reservations in New Hampshire, moving those funds to the Pennsylvania Senate race. You see, the interesting thing is that the NRSC and Mitch McConnell Senate Leadership Fund do not work in conjunction, but they definitely tell different stories. Because on one front, the Senate Leadership Fund, Mitch McConnell's PAC, is not funding this race, but the NRSC, Rick Scott's PAC, is funding this race. But there were definitely things to be said about the withdrawal of ads from the New Hampshire Senate race by the Senate Leadership Fund. And in many ways, too, there are things to take away from it right now. I think withdrawing ads from a race that sure is tightening is never a good look. And resurging $1 million into the race, quite frankly, probably is not going to do that much, especially when Maggie Hassan already has an advantage when it comes down to ad spending and when it comes down to fundraising advantage. Point blank, the Democrats are ahead in New Hampshire. And I can't say that's entirely surprising. You see, it's a state that President Biden won in the last election by 7.3%. It's also a state that Hillary Clinton won in 2016 and flipped to the Democrats in the 2016 Senate elections. So despite all of the other states going to the Republican Party, New Hampshire still went blue, which was an indicator that Democrats were still likely going to hold on to this race. And in many ways, again, and I've been saying many ways a lot, but you can still see the Democrats are still fundamentally ahead in the state of New Hampshire, but the Republicans are starting to invest more. And the thing is, I do think that the Republican Party at this point in time could very well come into victory into the state of New Hampshire if the national environment gets better for them in the generic ballot, in President Biden's approval rating, and in the overall fundraising and forecasting ratings and numbers, etc. A lot of the things that tell us right now that Democrats are ahead are things that can be changed by the Republican Party. It's things that can be changed on the national level should voters change their minds about different issues. For instance, if Republicans are more unpopular in November, chances are Don Bolduc is not going to win this race. If Democrats are less popular than they are right now, chances are they could come closer to winning this race. And if President Biden comes to a point where he's extremely disapproved of, it is also possible that that makes an impact and has a negative one on the Democratic Party and thus their chances at victory in the state of New Hampshire. But as of right now, I would still hold strong that I believe the Democrats are going to win this state. But Republicans are not giving it up too soon. They did seem like they were giving it up for quite some time, and the NRSC said that they did not spend as much money on this race because they expected other groups to, but other groups left for a reason. But now the NRSC doesn't think those reasons are valid enough, especially as a result of recent new polls, especially ones from Emerson College. Why does Emerson College matter in particular? Where they're telling us that Maggie Hassan is leading by 3 points, but guess what? In 2020 and 2016, they were spot on. In 2016, they said that Hillary Clinton was going to win the state of New Hampshire by 1 point. She won by 0.3. In 2020, they said Biden was going to win by 7 points. He won by 7 points. The Senate race, let's see if we can find the Senate race back in 2020, or not even 2020, the governor's race back in 2018, the last time we had a midterm year. What happened in the state of New Hampshire? The polls had an average of Chris Sununu up by 4. The University of New Hampshire had a tie, but Emerson said that Sununu would win by 8. He won by 7. So what we find here is that Emerson College in particular seems to be quite accurate when it comes down to polling data. I'm interested to see how accurate they are this time around, but if they are telling us that Maggie Hassan is going to win, I would say that it makes sense. But if they're saying it's a 3-point victory, that means it is still winnable for the GOP, especially given the accuracy of Emerson in the past. If Emerson is saying it is a 3-point race, it is still a winnable race for the GOP. The only way it wasn't winnable was when the numbers were better for Maggie Hassan, when she was leading at different points in time by 10 points statewide. But obviously that has narrowed up. The one thing that Maggie Hassan should be quite happy about, though, is that her numbers really haven't changed. Realistically, Donald Duck was never going to get just 41% of the vote. Voters here were just either did not know who he was or were unwilling to commit to voting for a Republican until they learned what he stood for. And now that they do, they are willing to support him. Maggie Hassan went and started out in this with 50% of the vote. Today is at 49.3, which technically means she is no longer at the majority, but she is very much at the plurality, leading across the state on average by 3.6%. Maggie Hassan's lead here of 3 points between Donald Duck and herself isn't super amazing. If anything, it's good for the GOP, but it still means that Democrats are on track for victory. Even though there is this expectation that Republicans advance where they are right now by the time we hit November, it is very possible that does not happen, or it is very possible that Maggie Hassan wins by a very narrow amount this upcoming election, just as she did back in 2016. One thing that I will say is that if you go back to 2016 and look at the numbers, Emerson said that Kelly Ayotte was going to win by 3. They were the most accurate in the governor's race, on the presidential race, but when it came down to the Senate in 2016, they said it was going to be a 3-point race in favor of the Republican. Maggie Hassan ended up winning. If anything, though, this is good news for Maggie Hassan. It means that Emerson sometimes does overestimate Republican support across the state. And her last Senate race, they did exactly that. So if you were to apply that swing to what we had in 2016 versus what they said, that would actually put Emerson at Hassan plus 7 statewide. Not 3, but 7. Maggie Hassan's lead here is something that should be celebrated by the Democratic Party, but I also will say that it is quite concerning, especially now that Republicans are deciding to jump back into the race. And I think this also might be something that we can look at in the lens of jumping in and out of races as a determination of what Republicans think they can or cannot do these midterm elections. When we talked about how the NRSC, or not the NRSC, but the Senate Leadership Fund funded by Mitch McConnell and others decided to pull out of the state of Arizona, it was a big deal. When they decided to pull out of the state of New Hampshire, it was a big deal. When they decided to pull out of individual states, and when sometimes you have the NRCC pulling out, the National Republican Congressional Committee, or RCC, or not even that. I don't know what exactly their terminology is. I know we had the DCCC. I don't know if there is an RCCC, but I know that there is a congressional wing of Republican campaigns. What we saw from them was they withdrew ads from J.R. Majewski's district, right? You saw that happen against Marcy Kaptur in the state of Ohio. You saw that happen in other congressional districts that were deemed no longer winnable. And that's what happened in New Hampshire, but it seems only briefly. Maybe it is equally as important to note, which is why there is this video here, about jumping back into a race as a means of Republicans doing better than they previously thought. Withdrawing their money from this race was probably a moment in time where they thought that New Hampshire was no longer winnable, that Pennsylvania needed to be funded, that Pennsylvania was the opportunity for the GOP and not New Hampshire. But now it seems as if that has changed. Not only is Pennsylvania an opportunity, but so is New Hampshire. Now, for a state that has been likely Democrat for quite some time on my forecast, I will say I am a bit surprised by the closeness of the polls, but that also means that my expectations and my ratings for the state are probably going to have to change as well. That's the thing. The state of New Hampshire is not one that is going to be likely blue regardless of what the polls say. It's going to be a state that very much does follow voting patterns, and based off of voting history and what voters are telling us, we have to take that into account as well. That is super important amongst anything when it comes down to election prediction, which means New Hampshire likely will change characterizations by the time we look at my next video. That's just the way that things are going to be, and chances are I'm releasing a prediction this evening as we are 2 weeks away until the midterm elections. For the political betting markets, though, I will say that the odds and chances for Maggie Hassan and Don Bolduc really haven't changed too dramatically. Yes, there were better points for Maggie Hassan. At different points in time, she was at 84 cents for a yes share, but today she stands at 72. Not exactly the severe and dramatic drop-off that is needed to show the Republicans winning, but there still is some advancement for the Republican Party. I will say that on the Senate forecast as well, you're seeing a similar thing to what we saw happen when it came down to predict it, though there was a point in time where Maggie Hassan had an 87% chance of victory. According to FiveThirtyEight today, that is 77%. Don Bolduc is at 23%. It's not exactly the best case for Republicans to be at 23, but it is an improvement. It's also not the worst case for Democrats, though it is something decreasing their chances and odds at victory in the state of New Hampshire. 23% is honestly not bad for a race that was written off as unwinnable by the GOP, by some of their other firms. So I will say, definitely some news out of this. The fact is, the Republican Party is becoming more and more ambitious across the United States, and we very well could see this happen not only on the Senate level, but also on the governor and congressional level. By congressional, I mean House of Representatives. But I also say on the Senate level, we could see Republicans potentially funneling money into states like Colorado, where you have Joe O'Dea, a pro-choice Republican, someone who I will say not many people are expecting to do quite well, and personally I expect him to lose, but I do think that he may surprise us, at least surprise us to the extent that the margin is closer than what we expect. Ron DeSantis recently has endorsed him, got a lot of heat for that, attacked by Donald Trump on that point because Joe O'Dea, in more ways than one, is a liberal, but also very much a conservative, holds liberal viewpoints, ultimately a conservative at the end of the day, but just a very interesting person. But Colorado in itself probably needs someone like that, a swing and moderate Republican, someone who would be able to win over the masses despite being fundamentally different from the rest of the state when it comes down, or at least the majority of the state, when it comes down to partisan identity, when it comes down to partisan politics. But Colorado very well could be seen as a state in the future, especially over the next week, if Republicans are actually making major advancements, as on the radar for the GOP. You can also see this potentially happening in states such as Washington, which don't really make much sense for the GOP, but the Republicans do believe that they have a realistic shot at victory here. They think that they could bring it down to low single digits. And while that may have been possible after Glenn Youngkin's victory back in 2021, because he flipped a Biden double-digit district, swung at about 12 points. If you were to swing Washington about 12 points, you would find it to be a 3 to 4 point Democratic state. But realistically, that's not going to be a swing state, but the GOP is still in their wishful thinking phase, at least right now. And it doesn't seem to help them that they are starting to invest more money into other races that they previously thought were untouchable, or not necessarily untouchable, but more so not going to be moving in their favor. So, main takeaways here, the GOP seems to be revealing to us that they believe they have it more than we think they do, that they have the Senate under control, and that they are going to go on the offense in a way that is quite interesting. Because before, it was all about playing defense in Pennsylvania, it was about playing defense in the state of Ohio, it was about playing defense in the state of North Carolina. But now it's about going on the offense. It seems as if they are confident about many other states and are willing to divest resources that could, quite frankly, still be used in the state of Pennsylvania, into states such as New Hampshire. A lot of this money for both campaigns will likely be wasted by the end of it. At the end of the day, when you lose a campaign, all of the money you put into it practically was wasted. But on the same front, we do have to say that because Republicans think that this is a race where this money won't be wasted, it might actually be a winnable race, and it might just be internal data that we have yet to see that is telling them that they are going to do well. I'm fascinated by this decision from the NRSC. Maybe they know something that we don't. Maybe they will see and produce a Republican victory on Election Day. Should that happen, I would be shocked. I think New Hampshire is still going to go to Maggie Hassan. I think the Democrats are still going to win it. But at the end of the day, I think there is very clearly a move in favor of the GOP nationally, and they are jumping on that, trying to win anywhere that they can, including the Senate race in New Hampshire. So thank you guys so much for watching this video. Make sure to comment down suggestions below. Subscribe on the left if you haven't already, and check out the Instagram and Twitter. At the bottom left of the screen, there's also a Discord server for you to go ahead and join. On the screen, there's a video you can watch, and then a playlist for my 2022 Senate election analysis videos. Again, thank you guys so much for watching, and I will see you all later today.